What is a rosebud, and who is Citizen Kane? These were questions I had for the longest time before I even saw the movie, and the only time I figured it out was at the very end. Citizen Kane came out in 1941 and was produced and directed by Orson Welles. The film stars Welles himself, Joseph Cotten, Dorothy Cummingore, and Agnes Moorehead. The film starts off with a documentary about Charles Foster Kane. After revealing many of the events that happened in his life and the accomplishments that he had, the documentary crew decided that the movie only tells what he did, but not who he was. So the editor decides if they find out what his last words meant, Rosebud, they'd be able to shed more light on his life and who Charles Foster Kane was as a person. So the editor sends a reporter to meet with various people in Kane's life to kind of decipher what exactly his last words meant, see if anybody knew what he meant by Rosebud. The plot is told through various flashbacks as the reporter meets up with the people in Kane's life. For example, he meets up with Susan Alexander, Kane's second wife. He reads the memoirs of Mr. Thatcher, and he speaks to Leland and Bernstein, who worked with Kane when he worked at the Inquirer, a business that he owned. We are then inserted into Kane's life, and the earliest memory that we see is when he is taken away from his family at a very young age. His mother signs over guardianship and his fortune to Mr. Thatcher, and Kane goes off with him to go to boarding school. We then flash forward, when Charles Kane is about to get control over his business affairs. He notices that he owns the Inquirer, and he decides that running a newspaper would be fun, so he sets off with his college buddy, Jebediah Leland, and Mr. Bernstein, and together they attempt to rebuild the Inquirer and make it into a more functioning newspaper. Eventually, he even signs all of the competitors' reporters from the New York Chronicle. Later in his life, Kane marries Emily Norton and decides to run for governor against Jim Geddes. When Geddes finds out that Kane is having an affair with Susan Alexander, he tells Kane and Emily that if Kane does not resign from the race, he will tell everyone about the affair. Kane refuses, and the affair eventually gets out, leading for the loss of the election and the divorce of his first wife. He then marries Susan Alexander and decides that she's a very good singer. So he convinces her to become an opera singer, and he even builds her an opera house. But not many people actually enjoy her singing. In fact, a lot of them grimaced when she was singing in front of them. Later, after one of her performances, Leland is actually writing a review on her performance, and Kane finds him asleep, passed out because he had been drinking. When Kane reads the review, he decides that he wants to finish it by himself, but follow the negative approach that Leland was writing about his wife. So Kane finishes the report and then fires Leland from his company. A little later in his life, Kane and Susan move to Xanadu, a giant mansion that Kane has built for Susan and keeps buying extravagant statues and animals, and it's just constantly growing. It's a huge mansion. Susan doesn't really like living in the mansion by themselves. She always asks Kane to go out and do things as opposed to just staying inside and completing jigsaw puzzles, but Kane isn't really apt to that idea. Eventually, the two get into a fight, and Susan actually leaves when Kane decides to act like a victim, when it was actually his fault that he had just been trying to buy her love, and buy everyone's love for that matter. After Susan angrily leaves, Kane destroys the room, and he can be heard saying Rosebud again. This is the second time we see Kane utter Rosebud in the film, and at this point, nobody knows what it means still. It's still a mystery to the audience and all of the characters except for Charles Kane, who is dead. Eventually, the reporter decides that there is no way he could possibly find out what Rosebud means, and he gives up. So everyone starts burning all of Charles Kane's old stuff at the mansion, and it is revealed that Rosebud is actually his childhood sled, as the final scene in the movie shows the sled burning in the incinerator, and then the camera slowly pans out over Xanadu, and the film ends. There are a lot of particular reasons that this film sticks out to me. The main one is how advanced the camera work was. I mean, Orson Welles was using shots from below to make all the characters look very tall and mighty. He used very large rooms that would just swallow characters sometimes when they started walking into the background. just all of the shots. A lot of them played with shadows really well. A lot of darkly lit scenes, created a lot of drama. And overall, it was just a beautifully shot movie, and it was very easy to watch. The cuts were very fluid, just very well made. Another thing that interested me so much about Citizen Kane was the actual premise of the plot, the meaning of the word rosebud. It is left to be kind of ambiguous towards the end of the film, but there has been a lot of commentary as to what that means. And the main theory would be that after being separated from his parents, Charles Kane felt like he always wanted to be in control of his life. So after that, everything he did, he had control, except when Susan Alexander divorces him. That was the next time that he was heard saying Rosebud before he died. Another time he lost control was in fact when he died. So these two times can show that throughout Kane's whole life he tried to always be in control of the situation. He always wanted people to love him. So he had a lot of trouble dealing with being in control of his life. And Rosebud was meant to represent his past and the first time that he lost all control of his actual life. So in murmuring these things to himself, he remembers his overall goal in life, and that is to remain in control. The thing I liked most about this film was not my initial viewing, as I had initially found it kind of boring, but it was the thoughts and the analysis that I did after watching the movie, just constantly thinking about the movie and all of the different layers of the complexity of how Orson Welles made this film. And that's where I think Citizen Kane really shines, as well as the camera work, and the story was pretty interesting.